everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so glad that you could be with us today. I'm Rebecca Sofer. I run Modern Loss, which is an in real life and virtual community and publication that has the sole focus of getting rid of the stigma that surrounds grief and loss and the experience of moving through it at any stage in the game after you're dealt with that hand. And also creating community around it, like talking about the tough stuff, talking about the joyful stuff, the surprising stuff, the taboo stuff. And so I've been really grateful to host Light After Loss with 1-800-Flowers over the last, like more than a year now, it's been going on. I love this series. I love the team at 1-800-Flowers. Honestly, I've truly been working with them for years now. They're amazing people. And the best part about this experience is that they understand that it's not just oh, okay, it's Valentine's Day, buy all the roses for all the loved ones in your life because they're all still alive. I mean, they also know that there's an underbelly to this experience too. And that chances are with any kind of milestone day or just like Tuesday night, there is a bittersweetness that accompanies those events because loss is a thing. It's just a reality that we live with. And if we care about anybody in this world, we're going to experience feelings of loss and grief. And the more we talk about it, instead of push it under the rug, the better we're going to get at not only talking about it with ourselves, but supporting each other and making the process a little bit kinder to the next person who goes through it. And so I've really loved hosting the series, and we have touched on all different types of things over the last several months. And today we are going to be focusing on something that is really close to my heart as a theater geek. We're going to be talking about grief and loss and how it has folded in to people's ability to do what they do on a daily basis. The grief and loss that we've experienced over the last 2 years, as a result of COVID-19, of isolation, of being unable to do our jobs in person, and what has, come out of all of that, the coping mechanisms we formed, the losses, how we've grieved that, how we filled in, what we're doing now. And we're here with a very awesome person. I'm so excited to be chatting with her today. Alexandra Silber. She is, basically it could take me a half hour to read all of her accolades, but I'm condensing it and you can look her up later as you should because she's amazing. She's a Grammy-nominated artist who has performed all over the world. She's been in Kiss Me, Kate. She was Tzeitel in the Tony-nominated Broadway revival of Fiddler on the Roof, which I saw. She's been in Carousel on London's West End. She's performed in international cabarets. By the way, not to make us feel like we've never accomplished anything, but she's also a playwright and an author to boot with 2 books under her belt. After Anatevka, which is a novel chronicling what happened to some of the characters from the Fiddler on the Roof story by Shalom Aleichem, and White Hot Grief Parade, which is actually a memoir about her father's death from cancer when she was only 18. So Alexandra Silber is here with us. And, I can call you Al.
Yes.
How many people break into song when they say that?
You're the first one.
No,
I'm kidding. No, I love it. It's wonderful. And it's a great way for people to remember your name. I've been Al as long as I can remember. And I love the name Alexandra, but Al's my at-home name.
And we're going there today. So I'm going there, Al.
It's an honor to be here. Hi.
Thank you so much. And we're friends and I followed your career. And, I just let's just get into it. So look, I just named a sliver of your accolades just now. You are a very active performer. You are a very successful performer and you perform in so many different arenas, right? Tell us, what was it like going from performing regularly and maybe having some sort as a successful, a working actor, performer, kind of having a sense of your schedule because this stuff is booked far out in advance for the most part. How was it going from having the sense of control and knowing what was going on and this knowledge that you were connecting every night to a grinding halt. I mean, tell us about what happened with your performing career in March of 2020.
Sure. So interestingly, like, I feel like we all have in some way where we were that day, and I'm no different. In March of 2020, I was actually back in London, England, in the middle of getting a play on its feet. I was in the Rebecca Teichman and Paula Vogel's Indecent, the Tony-winning production, moved to London, and I was so fortunate enough to be in it. We had been working away, getting it on its feet. We gone through all of tech, and we got 2 previews in. And on the Thursday, Broadway shut down. We performed Friday and Saturday and did not return on Sunday. And, they sort of came to this screeching halt, and our extraordinary company of 10 and the creative team, you sort of, just like everyone else, I think, but in my universe, the people on my airplane that went down, you're watching the world crash into this piercing silence that we all sort of came to know so well. And, that night, that weekend, I should say, from Thursday onward, my heart just surged with ache for the world. But in particular for the theater community, because it is one of the communities that I feel I exist in. And it's also a community whose very existence relies upon its liveness and the bearing of witness live and in person, which was suddenly, of course, taken from us by droplets. And I think the thing that's so interesting to me that I reflected upon was that theater really is this sort of sacred ritual. It has many of the sanctities of traditional ritual, and traditional ceremonies, like the repetition of the words and the songs and the intentions, the bearing of witness, and ultimately catharsis. And to have that taken from me as an individual was one kind of loss, but to know that it was taken from so many people that additionally love that experience and participate in it as churchgoers do, was suddenly and crashingly very profound. And within 24 hours, I was back on a plane, with no gear, with no mask, with no glove, just doing the best I could to get home. And I did, thank goodness, make it home, and was so simultaneously grateful to be safe and facing what I think a lot of us thought was the next 3 weeks in the company of my partner and my kitty cat, and in my space, almost unable to process the loss of not only the play, my experience of the play, but also of the theater and the world as we knew it. It feels like so many of the experiences that we had as a collective society existed like Russian nesting dolls. There was like the macro experience that everyone was sharing, and then these increasing experiences that became more and more and more specific to our own individuality. And I think ultimately this realization that we all shared this coronavirus experience. You could go to Timbuktu and someone has a coronavirus story, but we shared this experience in solitude in a very specific way for our own lives.
And as obviously, as we know, it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, as we know, here we are 2 years later. What did you tell us about? Like, what is it What did you go through? I mean, your calendar probably was shifted. You were at home with your partner and your cat.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? As you say, like much of your career really rests on the ability to connect with and move a live audience. With the sudden removal of that,
Yeah.
tell me what that felt like.
It's so hard to even begin to sort of like circle the feelings. And I think this is the part that's probably the part you and I can connect with the most, connect about the most, which is just that I'll just start like with the incredibly personal, in the sense that I, having lost my father at 18 so early in my identity as an adult, as a person, and having, if you will, I think that I say this in a sharing voice, like grief is the end of the world for an individual, for a family. It's the end of the world as they knew it. And I think what was happening was so many people, like this complete collective experience of everyone experiencing the end of the world. Some people for the first time, some people being veterans of world-ending emotions. And I don't know if you experienced this, but I think for the first few months, I was okay. And I think, if you will, I was a graduate student helping the freshmen of bearing disaster, and was able to hold a lot of space for other people that had never experienced an adversity like this before. And of course, no one in this living time has experienced an adversity like coronavirus. But if you will, just on the personal identity shifting, bearing that level of anxiety and dread and grief on a daily basis was something that I, on some parallel level, had borne.
Yeah.
And
I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from people. I mean, that we just went, and I also had the same thing. Like, I felt like I yanked myself back to early days of grief in March 2020. I'm like, what did I do? Like, as a survival mechanism in those early days? I'm like, okay, let's go back to those like early tools that I learned to get through every day, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time. It's funny that you said that, because I honestly, like, I can really relate to that. It was like right after my mom died, I did this to just get through. And I found myself doing the same in March 2020, and also giving my advice to anybody who was and wasn't asking me for my advice also on how to do it.
I relate. For me, the awakening and the hard feelings came later, when I think I had exhausted my capacity to hold space for other people without acknowledging my own experience. And I do think, another thing I've learned in my evolution as a person and in my grieving process is I definitely am, they say that in disaster, there are like the over functioners and the under functioners. And I definitely can over function in disaster. And that kind of, I wouldn't call it autopilot, but like, I can do in order to table feeling, and that doing and action are not the same as being present with feeling. And so that, for me, I had to sort of face that later. And luckily, because of my grieving experience so early in my life, I was able to know, I think this is a very, and not everyone has this. And but I'll say, for me, the thing that I learned from my grieving experience, the biggest thing I got, was that facing this incredibly universal fear in every time period, every culture, every socioeconomic bracket, color, and creed, the largest fear we face is losing someone we love. And to have faced that and not died, not spiritually collapsed on myself, on my dreams, not allowed it to murder my identity, was a superpower secret I have always been able to rely upon. And it's not like I haven't faced other adversities. But I think, my first major heartbreak, all of the disappointments that come with being an adult, especially a performer, I would always face those with this superpower secret of, this is hard, but I know I can bear it because I have been able to bear something so much greater. And so just stay with the feeling. And so I was able to do that with some valiance and courage, because you know that it will not destroy you. And I think that was kind of the pattern I followed. So what I'll say though is that I participated reluctantly in the pivots, in the Zoom readings, in the outdoor concerts on a rooftop. I participated in those things because I felt that it was important to try. And I felt that, in fact, you came to an effort that was made in the Berkshires in the summer of 2020, which
I was going to say, it was like July 2020. So we were months into the pandemic, and I saw Alexandra Silber is performing in Western Massachusetts and under a tent. And I'm like, where do I sign up? Like, can I be first in line? And I remember that night, I hadn't seen like any human beings in person for so long. And I remember we were all distanced. We were all masked. Even the performers, when you stepped off stage, mask went right back on. And yet the joy was so palpable. That feeling of like, we're together again, and I'm consuming art and you're sharing art. Like, what was that like for you, even as a reluctant participant in it?
Oh, sure. I think, first of all, it was one of the only live performances that happened that year. And we had to tick so many boxes and quite rightly for safety of the performers and the crew and the audience. And it's funny, at the time, I don't know if you felt this, at the time, it felt like we were so deep into the pandemic, but now I think July of 2020.
I know.
The beginning, I'll say, what was really interesting, speaking of loss and of joy existing simultaneously, it was a Rodgers and Hammerstein concert. It was in the Berkshires in this beautiful, beautiful theater. I was supposed to play Nellie Forbush in South Pacific there, and we had to pivot. And so there was, again, an element of lost performance. And one of the things that was so fascinating was just even the very first rehearsal, right? I haven't been in a rehearsal room in however many months. Never thought I never thought I could dream to be here again so soon. And then the realization of theater is such a social art form. It is not only consumed socially, it is created socially. Which is, I think, distinct from writing, right? My experience as a writer and as an author is it is created in solitude and consumed in solitude. And they are both beautiful for those specificities. But there you are in the rehearsal room wanting to run up to your castmates and embrace them, knowing you can't. And feeling even in the room the desire to come together and be close, knowing that you can't. So what I'll say is it was this simultaneous dialectic of enormous gratitude, joy, relief, life purpose actualization after so much loss and pain and fear, married with, this is not the same.
Yeah.
And this is, even though I'm doing it, there's still loss here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that, because a lot of, I think that these events are they're still curbed somewhat, I mean, you're still living in this performance landscape to this day where actors, performers, I've been lucky to see like 5 Broadway shows in the last 2 months with a vengeance, because I'm like, really need to catch up. And whenever I go, inevitably there's like, maybe one person who's out, or, maybe the show suddenly has to close for a couple of days. And so you say you're still probably living with this kind of new ongoing uncertainty of you just never know, right? Like you have to manage knowing that nothing is really a given anymore.
Totally. And I guess I'll kind of come back around to saying, having done that concert, and also felt the surge of relief and joy and gratitude from the audiences that risked a lot to be there and really gave up a lot, either geographically, in terms of convenience, in terms of the things they had to do to be in that tent with us, such as yourself. And fast forwarding to, I was so fortunate, Rebecca, to be able to return to Indecent in London, to be able to return to that piece that with all of the same 10 people who went down in the plane together, we were able to re-rehearse the play and see the play through in its entirety. We did the entire 4-month run at the end of 2021. And what was it was just such an incredible experience to have all shared the cataclysmic event together and then return to it changed, and I think what was also really fascinating, kind of going back to this comment about ritual, that the production, of course, was identical, but everything about us had changed, the actors, and everything about the world around us had changed. And, isn't that interesting? Like, the play is the same, right? And this is ritual. We speak the same words. We wear the same clothes. We sing the songs and move on the same lines. Ritual is beautiful because it doesn't change, you do. I'll say this too, sort of as we're winding down, like that I am so grateful, as I know so many of us are, to our essential workers who kept our cells alive and kept our communities and neighborhoods and worlds running as the world shut down. And what I'll also offer, though, is a challenge to the concept of what it means to be essential. Because while we were all in lockdown, don't tell me none of you read a book or listened to music or watched a television show or a film or a live stream of a piece of theater from the before times, or reclined or wept or slept on a sofa that was designed by someone. Art is essential to what makes us human and alive, not just keeping us alive, but making us feel that we are living. And in that way, while the essential workers kept ourselves alive, I hope and I endeavor to deserve the honor to be an artist who is an essential worker of tomorrow, because we look to artists to help us make meaning of existence. And hopefully we will be able to offer the world what all of this was for, what all of this meant, and how this experience of the coronavirus and everything else that happened in the last 2 years, which was not pandemic exclusive, how it changed our humanity and how it connects us to the history of humanity going back thousands of years. And it's an honor, because I think, artists are the essential workers of tomorrow.
I mean, I happen to completely agree with you. I think that our if we sit and think about it just even for a minute about what are the things that have been pulling us through during these times. I mean, how many of us have fired up Netflix just as a coping mechanism to get through the next hour? Maybe last winter or this winter, that was created for you. That was created for us by somebody. So I completely agree with you that the term essential kind of applies to a lot of people in the world, not just, caregivers, but people creating, people running, people, helping things to run. And that doesn't just mean logistically and mechanically, but also emotionally and spiritually, right? And psychologically. And so I'm so glad. Thank you so much for talking with me today and making your time. I know that you're, back in the swing of performing, even though, as you said, like we're in this new landscape where any sense of control we thought we had, we don't necessarily have anymore. But my hope is that, the arts can continue to be something that we can rely upon, and that performers keep doing what they're doing, because they make everything better for the rest of us. So
I join you in that. I join you in that hope and prayer. And I think ultimately, like, may we all, regardless of our artistic status, our essentialness, just continue to serve each other and bear witness to this, to one another in our humanity and in every emotion, from joy to grief. Because hopefully if this experience has taught us anything, it's that we are all mortal. And I think, people who've experienced loss know that so well. But we are all mortal, and we get one brief comet streak across the sky in this one glorious life, that, to use a parlance from my world, this life is not a dress rehearsal.
No, it's not. So on that note, Alexandra Silber, thank you so much for speaking with me today. Thanks for making the time. And thank you to everybody who watched this today. I meant to say, as you're watching it, or now that you have watched it, please feel free to drop your comments. We'll be hopping on later to respond to them, ask any questions. If you've struggled with the loss of the ability to connect in person, either through your job or through just personal coping mechanisms over the pandemic, please feel free to share your experiences, because our goal here is to create and pull together community and talk about the stuff that we should all be talking about, because there is no really healing without acknowledgement. And this is a space for acknowledgement. So thank you so much for joining us for Light After Loss, and we will see you next month.